Hi, my fellow fanatical elves. This is the Oracle Speaks. I am the Village Elliot. I'm here to tell you about the past, present, and future of the Cleveland Browns. My topic today continues yesterday's topic, the draft, and whether the draft is really what you think it is. I believe that it's something that's completely different. I believe that it's very hard to get talent out of the draft in the first year that you draft the players. I think they get better in year 2, 3, and 4. So year 1, they're not likely to have that much impact. Now there are exceptions. Detroit Lions, also the Houston Texans had phenomenal drafts, but not everybody is going to do that. Well, all right. So let me turn the sound down here a little bit. Let me just do that. There we go. And thank you again to Free Sound Music for providing the music for our show. Let me tweak the sound as always. Okay, go to audio, cancel, reduce this, adjust mic volume, and there I am. Okay, that's a lot better, isn't it? All right, so yeah, the point that I made last time is that I believe that the undrafted free agents make at least as high a contribution to the team as the drafted players. That may seem kind of strange, but I also think that there's a reason for it. It's easier to find undrafted free agents if you've got like 30 of them to choose from and you're trying to fill like 6 or 7 roster spots. In the draft, you have to pretty much choose the right player from the get-go and stay with them. And oftentimes what happens is you pick the wrong player and he stays on the roster and kind of clogs things up. And, that really takes away from the team rather than adding to it. So you have to be careful about the draft. The draft does not do just good things. It does some negative things as well if you don't get it right. And not everybody gets every draft pick right. All right, so let's talk about where we left off yesterday. And I remind everyone, the Browns actually had 2 players that made the all-rookie team for the NFL last season. We made a lot of noise about DeJuan Jones, who was the right tackle for most of the season, did a really good job in 9 starts, and just really played at a extremely high level, had knee surgery that took him out of the lineup for the rest of the year. And we hope he comes back stronger and better than ever. Hope that he does. Also, though, there was an undrafted free agent, Ronnie Hickman, who also made the NFL All-Rookie team as a safety. And he also did a really good job. For what it's worth, Pro Football Focus graded him as a top 20 player. How about that? So let's summarize the results from yesterday's show. And we showed evidence that in year 1, Browns undrafted players achieved more than the drafted players. And you just look at the stats, it's ridiculous. The Browns had more starts from undrafted players than drafted players. Of course, they had more yards. And by the way, again, let me emphasize that I'm including recycled veterans that are getting paid around the NFL minimum, along with the true undrafted free agents. So guys like P.J. Walker, I'm kind of considering together with the undrafted players. P.J. was added after training camp, managed to throw 646 passing yards for the Browns, beat San Francisco. What the heck? And on the other hand, I like Dorian Thompson-Robinson, but he didn't post numbers as a rookie. He also got injured, and I would say his rookie lack of awareness, I guess, resulted in those injuries. I think that he'll take better care of himself with more experience, and he'll do better, stay in the game longer, not have as many injuries because he'll be wiser. But that's not year 1. That's not who we had in year 1. The Browns got 224 receiving yards from Cedric Tillman, and The Browns only got 47. Most of them were from Pierre Strong, but they had 389 rushing yards from the two quarterbacks and Strong. But on defense is where it went really crazy. The drafted players were responsible for 24 tackles, and the undrafted players had 106 tackles. They had 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, 2 interceptions, and one of them was a pick 6. So the whole thing is crazy. They also, by the way, the Browns undrafted players, James Prochet and also Strong, combined for 750 return yards. So the achievements clearly favor the undrafted players. And I mentioned again and again, there's a reason for that. It's very simple to understand, is if you have an empty roster spot, you can look at 20 or 30 guys in camp or around the league when you're scouting them. You got at least that many candidates that you can choose from in order to fill those empty spots. But when you draft, you commit to only one player. That player is going to be on your team pretty much for sure for the better part of 4 years. Rarely do you cut a player who you drafted, though it does happen infrequently. And a lot of times those players are just not as good as we thought, and they stay on the roster anyway. That doesn't happen with an undrafted free agent. If you aren't good, you're gone. And it's a tough way to live, but those undrafted players actually outplay the drafted players. It's a consistent basis, not just one time. All right, so what do we know about that? What do we learn from this? And how are we going to arrange the NFL draft based on this great knowledge? And again, I put this in a different way. Those who have video, Browns draftees rarely blow away the NFL in year one. And even Myles Garrett, okay, we had Myles Garrett was a rookie in 2017, right? But he wasn't nearly as good as he is now. So that 2017 team went 0-16, even with Myles Garrett, which is hard to believe, but they did. And rookies just are not that super good. They get better. There's no such thing as a sophomore jinx. They get better in year 2. They get better in year 3, usually. And they really develop, and the better players develop even longer and get even better into their late 20s. So expecting to have instant success is really bad. Browns fans have been brought up expecting rookie quarterbacks to succeed brilliantly in their rookie year. That rarely happens. I mean, sometimes you get C.J. Stroud, but more often than not, you get somebody like Deshaun Kaiser, who I think probably could have played quarterback in the NFL, but the Browns managed to ruin him by throwing him out into the playing field before he was ready, way before he was ready to play. That was that kind of non-thinking belief in rookies is just bad for everyone. So again, the central point from yesterday, the empty roster spot is worth something to a team that can evaluate talent, especially after roster cutdown day. That's your Cleveland Browns. They're able to put good players on the team even after the training camp is over. And the reason is that you get to select from multiple players rather than be stuck with one guy in the 7th round. So if you have a 7th round pick, he probably makes the team and stays there, even if he's not nearly as good as some of the undrafted guys that made the team around him. Let's talk about trading picks. What does this tell us about trading picks? And let's talk about what kind of trades were made in 2023, so you know that I'm not making it up. Chicago made a trade where they moved from 9th overall to 10th overall, and they received a 2024 round pick. Now, I use a value chart, which kind of gives points for each draft pick to figure out how much they're worth. And it doesn't matter what scale you use. You can use the old Dallas Cowboys chart if you want. I think the one by Fitzgerald and Spielberg is probably about the best, in my opinion. One of the fans, by the way, responding to one of my articles, pointed that out to me, and I'm grateful for that. But anyway, what if you take those points and just sort of compare it numerically, Chicago benefited by getting that 2024 fourth round pick, and their trade value points were 2,433 versus 1887 for the other team. I forget who the other team was, but anyway, that's a 29% interest in terms of what was paid in the future. So for trading for a future pick, they got 29% interest. That's crazy. Similarly, okay, Arizona made a trade from third overall, and they also gave up a fourth round pick. They received 12th overall, but they also got a 2024 round one pick and a 2024 third round pick. Now, I value those picks, by the way, at position 16, because you don't know whether they're going to be good or bad. And so you just say, well, maybe they're going to be an average draft. And so I'm assigning points based on the idea that an unknown draft pick in the future corresponds to position 16 in the draft. So that's just the way I did it throughout. And once again, the team that traded for future assets, got a big interest rate. They got 25% interest on that pick. And I think you can, in fact, regard draft picks the same way that you do money. Investment theory applies. You got more picks in the future, better picks in the future by making these trades. Here's a one-for-one deal that was pretty interesting. The Eagles traded their 2024 third-round pick and got the 2023 fourth-round pick. So they traded the next year's good pick for this year's not quite as good pick. And once again, the team in the future, the 2024 third round pick was worth 786 points versus 642 for that fourth round pick. That's 22% interest. That's pretty high. Those are really great numbers if you're an investor. And I think you should invest in draft picks the same way that you invest in money. Try to save something for the future. A second example of this was the Cleveland Browns trading their 2023 seventh round pick. They did this last year, remember, to the Ravens, and they're going to get the Ravens 2024 sixth round pick. So they move up in the draft effectively, and but they also move back in terms of the year. It's going to be later in 2024. So the Browns now have that sixth round pick and can draft somebody. And the Browns got the equivalent of 35% interest on that deal. So if you're going to get interest rates like that, I think you have to make some deals. And the later the round is, the better it is to trade those picks, because you just don't have enough successes to make it worthwhile. So don't tell me that Tom Brady was drafted in the sixth round. I already know that. Now, how many times have you drafted somebody as good as Tom Brady in the sixth round? I think it hasn't happened yet. Brady was drafted in 1999 or 2000, and there is only one. So the Browns are not going to get Tom Brady just because they have a sixth round pick, but they do have more value than a seventh round pick. All right. I would argue that the seventh round picks have negative value. And once again, I claim that it's better to have an empty roster spot that you can use to sign players, find out how good they are, drop the ones that don't make it. Effectively, you're able to audition 20, 30, 40, maybe 100 players that you look at before selecting one as an undrafted player or recycled free agent. And so it's not surprising you get more stars as undrafted than from round 7. Let me test your memory. When was the last time that the Browns drafted an impact player from round 7? Maybe never. But they did have some successes. And I'll point out to you defensive back Eric Hogg, 2011. He managed to play 22 games in his career and start 4 times. Is that stardom? Well, for a fourth round draft pick, or excuse me, for a seventh round draft pick, that's pretty good for the Cleveland Browns. Getting 22 games in a career is pretty good for the seventh round. Alex Hall, the linebacker from 2008, had 32 games and 35 tackles. 35 tackles. I mean, man, that's like half a season worth. But okay, that's pretty good for a seventh round pick. Now, they did have some starters back in 2002. Remember, the Browns were an expansion team back then. They had two linemen, one in 2002, the other one in 2001, Joaquin Gonzalez and Paul Zukowskis. Both played over 40 games and had 14 starts for Gonzalez and 18 starts for Zukowskis. So that's a full season almost. And in Zukowskis' case, a little bit more than a season. Is that really stardom? I don't know. Is that an impact player? I don't know. It's like somebody that's kind of making it in the NFL, but not really starring in the NFL. They're mainly a backup or a special teams player. And there just is not a history that suggests that you can draft great players in round 7, certainly not on a consistent basis. Last time they had a guy that played, you could say Zane Gonzalez, the kicker, kicked for the Browns one year. Wasn't really that good, but he did play. And so I'm going to keep on beating this drum all off season. It's better to audition several candidates for that roster spot from the pool of undrafted free agents and recycled veterans. Or you can draft that wonderful player in round 7 that you think is so good and be faithful to him for years and keep him on the roster, even if he doesn't deserve it. That's what most NFL teams do. Even if they don't deserve to be on the roster, because they were drafted, they kind of have this halo around them and they get to keep their position on the team. Now, I don't know. Is that playing it safe? Is that being a conservative drafter? Not a wild man like the Village Elliott? Or is this just plain stupid? And I would say that it is stupid to draft players in round 7. It's not worth it. You don't have that kind of returns, or at least the Cleveland Browns have no evidence that they can produce enough players consistently to make it worthwhile to draft guys in round 7. All right, so I want to do a thought experiment on investing draft picks. Now, this, investing, I know a lot of people are going to get mad at the idea. You can't invest draft picks. Well, yes, you can. We just pointed out examples in the last draft where a team traded a 7th round pick for a future 6th. And there are other examples of a 6th round pick being traded for a future 5th, and so on. There were more than one trade where they traded up and into the future from the 2023 draft. So let's say that you started out with a 7th round pick. You trade that to a 6th round pick. Then the next year you trade the 6th round pick for a 5th round pick, and so on. Then if you do that every year, eventually you're going to wind up with a round 1 pick. So how about that? Would it be building for the future to have a 1st round pick manufactured out of nothing in 6 years? I think it would. I think you should be doing stuff like that and manufacturing extra round 1 picks by shrewd training and by investing these not so valuable picks and getting them to grow into picks that are more valuable. Why isn't that building for the future? Why is getting future high draft picks for present low draft picks, why is that not considered building for the future? That makes no sense to me. Drafting players that can't play and playing them now, that doesn't help the 2026, 2027 team at all. So let's put it in the bottom line, for those who have video. Drafting players that have high probability of not achieving a second NFL contract and protecting their roster spot is not building for the future. It's just dumb. NFL teams do dumb things. like not investing for the future and instead investing for the present in players that they know or they should know in advance that they're not able to deliver successes at a high enough rate to justify it. All right, so I talk here about investment theory, and you can figure out who wins trades by using a method to assign point values to different draft picks. This was done by the Dallas Cowboys in the Jimmy Johnson era. Boy, that was a long time ago, about 1990. And there's better ones that are developed more recently. And use whatever you want, but you can keep score that way and figure out what's more valuable and how much value are you adding from year to year. And so I'm saying that if it was me, I would almost never keep a 7th round draft pick. I would try to trade it. I would try to trade a round 7 pick for a future asset. I would try to get a round 6 pick if I could, just like the Browns did in 2023. Or I would include it in some kind of other deal that would help to build assets for the 2025 draft, 2026 draft. Okay, players that are drafted in rounds 3, 4, and 5, and maybe even 6 are in fact draftable. They can be good players on a regular basis, but they're not really that good in year 1. Not so good in year 1. So be willing to consider all trades that pay huge interest. And, let's do another thought experiment inside the thought experiment. What would be better for the 2025 Browns? Let's suppose that they could have a 3rd round pick, or they could have a 4th round pick with a year of experience. Which would you take? I think it's kind of a wash, so that these picks that are getting higher and higher by trading, or more and more valuable by trading, will actually be able to contribute better because you're starting with a more talented athlete. And I think that there is merit to the 4th round guy playing better in his 2nd year, but is he really better on the average than a 3rd round pick in year 1? I think that's kind of a wash. So I think, but clearly the more you trade into the future, the better the future is going to be. And I also think that in the present, you can afford to do that. As long as you're building up draft capital in the future, your undrafted free agents and recycled veterans are going to be able to plug those holes and do it more effectively in the short run. So I'm not saying get rid of your draft picks. I'm saying get better draft picks for the future. Don't draft players that are not going to make the team, or that shouldn't make the team. I guess that's what I really mean to say. So, all right. So this is how I want to summarize round 1 and 2 players. If you go forward with those guys, should become starters in year 1. They may not be super outstanding. Not everybody is going to be CJ Stroud, for example, but you should be able to have a starter out of your round 1 pick. Maybe a quarterback you might sit on a bench for a year. Browns would never do that, but a normal team would. And 2nd round players also should be starters. Round 3, 4, and 5 are kind of hit and miss. You can often get players that play at a high level, but a lot of them strike out as well. It's better to trade for higher picks, see if you can get into round 2, round 1 in the future, and be willing to give up some of those opportunities and replace them with UDFAs, undrafted free agents. Round 7, as I've mentioned several times, I really don't have much affinity for them. I would probably trade those picks every year. Round 6, you could go either way. The Browns do get players out of round 6 that are halfway decent. Not as frequently as round 3, 4, and 5, however. We had Donovan Peoples-Jones that had 2 really good seasons for the Cleveland Browns. Year 1 was okay, and the year 4 was troubling, and he actually wound up getting traded to Detroit. But the point is that teams around the NFL are willing to pay very high interest for draft picks. They will give 25, even 30% to be able to move into the present from the future. So I think, okay, let them do that. And we, the Cleveland Browns, will stockpile better draft picks in the future. And I would especially make an effort to trade that round 7 and probably round 6 if a decent deal comes along. Okay, that sounds crazy, doesn't it? Trade away the late round draft picks, try to get draft capital in the future instead of the present. Well, yes, that's how you build for the future. You get more draftees in the future. Don't get draftees in the present that don't play and don't contribute in the future. I think it makes sense. Okay, here's Sashi Brown, of course, is kind of the Antichrist in Cleveland, but he did do some things right. There were some things he did very wrong. I'm not going to harp on those. But what he used to do was he would take his number 1 pick, which is usually a good one because the Browns were rags, and he would trade for a later number 1 pick, and he would also get another number 1 pick for the following year. And maybe you'd have to add number 3 or something in order to make that come out. But anyway, he would do that. And every year the Browns would have 2 number 1 draft picks. I think that was a wise strategy. And you do that every year. Every year, try to have 2 first-round picks, even if they're not as high as they could be. If you trade back and get more draft capital for the next year, it's not a bad thing. Just always be having 2 number 1 round draft picks in a draft. Brown eventually wound up with a 1st overall and 4th overall pick in the 2018 draft, but of course it was John Dorsey who made those draft decisions by that time because Sashi got himself fired for some other dumb moves that he did make. I won't talk about them at this time, but other than to say that I believe that he did deserve to be fired because of what he did. But that doesn't mean that his draft strategy was bad. I think his basic idea of investing in future draft picks was good, and that that kind of thing is going to work in the long run. And I think if Sashi Brown had been presiding over the 2018 draft, he would have traded back again, and the Browns would have had 2 round 1 picks in 2019. Instead, what happened was that Dorsey decided to trade that number 1 pick for Odell Beckham Jr., and the Browns did not have a 1st round pick in 2019. I don't really see that that's building for the future. I don't really even see that it's a good idea for the present, but that's what they did. Okay, summary. Rookies, not as good as you think. The NFL draft, not as impactful as you may think. The Browns did get a good player out of the draft in DeJuan Jones. He was really the standout. No question about it. There, also the Texans with C.J. Stroud did very, very well. And they also had some other draftees that were pretty good and close to the NFL rookie team and so on. But for the most part, the 1st round picks are not really that special in their first year. Most of them get better in years 2, 3, and 4 if the team has patience, especially the quarterbacks get better as they get smarter and learn from training camp and from playing in the preseason games. So a lot of times the teams that are playing to win now, they try to get extra picks in this year's draft and trade away future resources. And I believe that that is the wrong strategy entirely. And by the way, a great example of that would be the San Francisco 49ers stocking up on being able to draft a quarterback in number 3, and he never worked out. That wasn't really building for the future to make all those draft trades in order to get Trey Lance as a number 1 pick. That didn't really help the future that much. It would have helped them a lot more if they'd had some stronger draft picks in the future. That's how you build for the future. Have better picks in the future. They could find guys that were free agents and so on in order to replace them. Of course, you're going to mention Brock Purdy was, in fact, a really good quarterback obtained in round 7. But again, that doesn't happen that often. The Browns never had success in round 7 with a player of great magnitude. So I would say for sure, trade that round 7, probably also trade round 6. Be receptive to trading other draft picks as long as it's not too extreme. But be willing to take that 25%, 30% interest when you do so. Those can all be really, really good moves. All right, so there you have it. I've really committed some acts of heresy, stating my belief that the NFL draft, especially the Cleveland Browns draft, does not produce fantastic results in year 1. It produces better results in year 2, year 3, year 4, as those rookies learn and improve. But in the short run, if you're trying to win now and you're doing everything you can in order to win games in this year, I think the undrafted free agents are probably going to help you more than sticking to those draftees from the late rounds. I really think that's true. There's no way that the 7th round guys who stayed on the team were actually as good as the undrafted free agents. So that's my opinion. Sounds crazy, but if I were in charge of the draft, I would be trading away late round picks, especially, and yet I would be very aggressive about signing undrafted free agents and guys that are close to the NFL minimum as they get cut late in summer training camp. Try to pick up those good players that can't make the roster on some very good teams because they have too much depth. Try to obtain those players. They're going to perform better than some guy you drafted in round 7 or even round 6 that you're kind of stuck with. So that's what I think. I truly believe that most of the NFL approaches the draft in the wrong way. They're not realizing that they could help the future a lot more by investing in the future rather than investing in players right now that don't help the team in year 1. And if you have fewer picks in the future because you did that, that's not investing in the future at all. That's taking away from the future and building only in the present. And it's not the right way to work. So everybody have a great day. We'll be back and raring to go to talk Cleveland Browns football. Draft is coming up. And also we're going to also do some scouting on the new United Football League. See if there are some players there that the Browns could take. Last time they did have a couple or 3 players that they selected, including Dearness Johnson, who did very well for them as a kind of an extra running back. And I also liked the leading passer, Garrett Gilbert, who was a 3rd stringer on the Browns for a while. I've always liked him. I still think he would be a good backup quarterback or number 3 guy, at least. And if the Browns go for 3 picks or 3 quarterbacks on the roster this season, I think they probably ought to invite him to summer camp and see what he's got left. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Take care, everyone. Bye for now.